Hey everybody, okay, welcome to Problem Framing AMA number 13. How's everybody doing? My name is Jay Malone. I'm the founder of New Haircut, a product strategy firm. So we help product teams take new ideas to market using design thinking. This week, sorry, a little bit of fog brain going on. This week, the AMA is about problem framing, which is one of the really critical discovery tools that we use at the early part of our conversations with teams to help bridge the gap and build alignment on important customer-centered problems that they're trying to understand and unpack and eventually solve. So we use problem framing predominantly to kickstart and help to reframe important design challenges that we can then take into our solution validation phases, where we use tools like design sprints. If this is your first time coming into one of our AMA events, welcome. Thanks for being here with me. What you'll see, what we do is we use this mural board to capture all of the questions that folks have about the specific topic. And so if you're coming on in and you've added some questions, I can see that there's a few questions that we'll get to today. So if you have new questions, grab an empty Post-it over here, type them in. You can see that there's some categories that you can drop them into. If you're not sure where to leave them, just drop them at the bottom in the notorious other block, and we'll get to those as well. If you'd also like, there's questions over here that have been asked and answered in the past. You can click this link and you'll be taken to the spot in the AMA from that past AMA where I answered those questions. Otherwise, you can also watch full recaps and recordings from past AMAs. And below this section, you can see upcoming AMAs that we have. So problem framing is one of 3 AMAs that we do in our circuit. The other is on facilitation, and the last is on design sprints. We host these every 2 weeks, and they cycle through. So we'll do the next problem framing AMA in 6 weeks from now. And finally, at the bottom, if you want to take the ideas and things that you're learning in here further, there's some additional resources for you to download and get access to. Before I start answering some questions, some exciting news. If you go to our events page, newhaircut.com/events, you'll find all of the AMAs that we're doing, and you'll also see that we're going to start announcing some problem framing workshops that we're doing in partnership with some of our business partners. Product School and Mural is one of them. We'll also be announcing similar events with Butter, with Miro, and with Product Board. And all of those workshops will be interactive. They're meant for executive level product management folks working inside of medium and enterprise size companies. So that's who will benefit most from attending these workshops, where we'll be talking about a lightning form or a rapid form of problem framing. So we'll be getting into that, give you some tools, and there will be some takeaways that you'll have so you can take the learning and take it into your team, along with some additional resources. So if you can make that, you'll start to see those events pop up on our events page as well as on our social channels. And finally, one of the resources, if you're excited and really want to dig into problem framing, one of the resources at the bottom of our mural board today is the problem framing toolkit. So that is a complete comprehensive toolkit that we've created to give you all the training and coaching along with the exact resources and templates that we use inside New Haircut to facilitate our problem framing workshops with our clients, with our product client teams. So you can find more access there, more information there at newhaircut.com/problem framing toolkit, a couple dashes in between the words there. Again, that link is at the bottom within the additional resources right here. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes and I'm going to rip through as many questions as I can. If I don't get to your question, please come back. Please add your questions. And otherwise, upvote your questions and other questions so that I prioritize them next time around. So I picked out a few that I wanted to get into today. The first that I'm seeing here, so in what I'm looking at, we are in the category of the process and specific activities. So New Haircut has a version of problem framing and a specific recipe and a set of activities that we use to drive problem framing as a method. So we have our own specific recipe. There are plenty of others out there that exist. So typically when we receive questions about the process and activities, they're asking about our method or our recipe of problem framing. So the question is there a digital activity to replace the eye opener, which is called Draw It, for remote sessions? Yes. What you'll find in the toolkit, there's a whole bunch of resources. So let me just open this thing up for a second. What you'll find inside the toolkit, there's digital templates for Mural and Miro support. There's videos, as I mentioned, facilitator's guide, presentation decks. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But then there's also all of these additional resources that we've gathered together. A couple of them include links to libraries of activities that you could use, whether you're in person or remote, icebreakers, warm-ups, specific strategy, team builders. So there are libraries that exist out there that are complimentary public access that you can use to, depending on what your goals, what the team is trying to accomplish. And those are linked to inside the toolkit. So you can find those there. Next, I saw these questions, which I felt were connected. So one of the first activities in our problem framing is what we call the smart sailboat. And so it's meant to sense and sort of like surface up potential problems or opportunities that the team is interested in solving. And so the question is about that first activity there from Kristine, and then another question from somebody else that I felt was related. First question, are the problems or anchors, right? So in the activity, the problems that the team surfaces up because it's a sailboat activity. So the analogy is that the problems that the team is interested in solving are anchors or things that, because they haven't been solved yet, are holding the company back, right? So that's the metaphor. So are the problems supposed to be big problems in the world, in the industry, or small problems? Problems with the team, the product, etc. So problem framing is not specific to an industry. It's not specific to a modality, it's not specific to a product or a service. So problem framing is a business strategy tool to help surface potential opportunities that the company would like to invest in and potentially solve. And so you can go fairly narrow on say in the world of digital, if you're working on a new consumer experience or you're trying to take a consumer experience and shift it to a new market segment, then you might want to think about specific problems within there that you're trying to solve, some customer-centered problems. So helping them improve on getting up to speed with your product, or helping, etc. So you can go really narrow and specific within a product that you're working on or a new service that you're ideating, but you can also shift out and think about improving workflows between departments, improving communications, changing the way that your customer call center interacts and supports your customers that call or click in, right? And so you can flex up or down depending on what you're trying to solve, what's important to the company. And then within our method of problem framing, there's a step in there that allows you to then, what's the word I'm looking for? To segment out the relative complexity of those problems so that you can see them side by side ranging from simple problems to complicated to complex and altogether very chaotic problems. So as you work your way through the process, you're then able to sort of see the level of complexity and check in with the team and check back with strategic prioritization about what's important for the team to be solving. So there's a range of activities and conversations to be had. But at the start, what this question is asking is, should they be big or small or specific or industry focused? That's really up to the team and what's important and what's on your strategic roadmap and what you're trying to solve. But problem framing will not break or is not suited for one thing or the other. And then the related question is, how much do you coach the participants in the harbor section? Do you just take what they offer? Or do you ask them to drill further? So in order for the team in doing this activity and surfacing those problems that they'd like to be solved, there's a first step in there, which is called shaping, or kind of like setting up the harbor. So where are we headed as a group, as a company, as a team working in this space right now? And that helps to set some constraints on what's in scope for this conversation. So maybe like a theme, a segment, a technology, a market focus, an industry focus, right? And so that harbor or those constraints help to narrow and focus the group in terms of what problems within those constraints should we be nominating and talking about within this workshop. And so do I coach them? Well, what I do is I facilitate them, and meaning that I pull those constraints out of them and surface them so that the group can see them and buy into them and understand what they are. And I do that individually. So I'll meet with individual stakeholders, people that will be in the workshop, and as well as senior leaders and stakeholders that won't be part of the workshop, but we need to hear what's important to them. And so I'll bring those constraints forward and have them as part of the session so that the team can see those constraints, ask questions about them, make sure that they feel good about them. And then do a little bit more iteration of them if necessary during that harbor discussion. So I do it before the workshop. I also do it at the start of the workshop so the group understands what those constraints are so that they can then bring forward the problems that they'd like the company to or the team to solve. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Next question. Any tips on aligning people on how they will make a decision? For example, what if they don't want to make a decision based on impact versus difficulty? Okay. Importance. These are my notes. I'm trying to remember what my notes are about. Importance of focus. Importance of focus by prioritizing. I don't remember what I was talking about there. Let's see. So any tips on aligning people on how they will make a decision? Yeah, okay. So, I think the toughest part, one of the challenges of running a workshop that takes more than 30 minutes, right? So like my problem framing workshops are typically like 3 half days, which is fairly intense, especially for groups that aren't used to working in that fashion. And so when busy people know that they're going to be attending one or a few 3-4 hour session workshops, they have this mindset that they should be able to get more out of the process compared to nothing. So just in general, they think if I'm going to spend this much time, we should be able to figure out a bunch of stuff. The problem with that is that you immediately splinter the focus of the group. And so I actually go in the opposite direction in my problem framing workshops. And I go from many ideas so that they're all in front of us and they're there and they're captured, and whittling down until we have one problem that the group is bought in on solving next. And so I take them through a series of steps and activities and conversations so that we can go from many to one. And so the pushback, though, is there and it's real. So as we start to whittle down, the tension starts to mount for people as they see their ideas that are being pushed to the perimeter or just don't make sense to talk about further for now. They start to get a little anxious. And so my job as a facilitator is to remind them that nothing's getting deleted. We've just decided that given all of our constraints and criteria and expectations and objectives of what we're doing right now, it makes sense to focus on these things, not these things. All right. And so in order to do that, we have to start making some decisions. We have to start comparing things, relative complexities. One of the tools I use to help them focus and narrow further is a tool I learned from the Luma Institute, which is the impact versus effort or impact versus difficulty matrix. And the idea there is to take a smaller set, and there's not enough time to talk about how we got to that, but a smaller set of problems and decide on the top one that we move on with next. And we run that through the workshop, which takes another day or two, and we may invalidate or decide to stop working on that along the way or after we do some additional research. Then we come back, and now what we have is this prioritized list of next problems to work on. So again, nothing's throwaway. And now even more so, instead of having to go through this process over and over again and always reprioritizing, you prioritized at that time, and the group can go and look back at it and take number 2 off the list and work that through. If they still don't want to do it, or they feel like there's a different way to do it, there's also different activities that I've used. So the new usable feasible is another prioritization method. Another method that I use before the impact versus difficulty is the Kinevin framework. So there's lots of tools, but it depends on what the team is going for and what the pushback is all about. Oftentimes it's just fear of missing out, of that things are being tabled and we'll never come back to them. And I understand that fear because sometimes you've waited all this time for your idea to be part of the conversation, so you're really advocating for it. And so that's why we need to have a group conversation so that we are bought in and feel like this is the right thing to move forward with. But at the end of the day, a project team can typically only take one thing through the workshop. No, not typically. They can only run with one idea through the workshop, not several. Okay. Let's see. What are these 2 questions about here? Here's another question about the impact difficulty matrix. How do you bridge the gap between... Okay, let's take this one. Have you done the impact difficulty mapping from both the business and user perspectives? And then, I think there's a missing N in here. And then compare the two to help aid in prioritization. Yes, this is a great question. Super insightful. So the impact versus difficulty matrix, it's 2 axes. And so on the one, you're mapping out the relative first impact that we would have in solving this problem. There's some challenges and questions that we can get into there, but I'm just going to stick to this question for now. And then on the other axis is the relative difficulty it would take. So the relative effort it would take to solve each of these nominated problems. And so on the impact scale, what we're measuring is fundamentally what we're trying to measure is the impact it would have to whomever the market is, whomever the top nominated persona or customer or human being or patient or fan, etc., that we're solving for. That's what it means to be human-centered and customer-centered, which is great. And that's the foundation, and I think that's what's fundamentally important and sort of like the driving principle of design thinking and human centricity. And because we're a company and the company needs to make money and we need to make sure that it aligns back to what the company is interested in working on and solving and building brand awareness and making money from, there's also a criteria where we can look at and evaluate the impact it would have to the company. And so I would always recommend that you start with the customer, because most of the time the company is only thinking about themselves and how much money they're going to make. So it's great to start with the customer, and then you can do another round of the impact difficulty and talk about the impact to the company. And then you have sort of like these two things that these two sort of like maps that you can overlay on top of one another to make a sort of like combined informed decision. What would have the most impact to the customer and the company with maybe a relatively lower effort, right? So that's sort of the conversation that you're having. What I would stress not to do is to just single-handedly focus on the impact to the company. Because if you're only thinking about sales and not thinking about the value to your customer, then the long-term value there is probably short-sighted. With just a few minutes left, let's see what this question is. Is it related? How do you bridge the gap between the desired business impact and the customer outcome? Yeah, well, I think that's just it. I think if you do have that conversation, so if you go through each of the problems that you've brought into this part of the activity, right, from many down, and now you have, say, 5. Out of the 50 that you had originally nominated, you have 5, and you're trying to figure out the top one. You go through this impact versus difficulty decision or conversation, and that conversation brings forward these things. And so like if you, I'm not being clear there, if you have the conversation about impact to the customer, and then you have the conversation about the relative impact to the company, in doing so, that conversation brings to light hopefully it helps you and the group decide on which one is the most important, and you do start to see the relationship between impact to the customer and impact to the company. Seeing this activity would help a lot. It's very clear in my mind because I know exactly what the grid and the matrix looks like. Let's see, I've got 3 minutes left. I'm just going to see if I can squeeze one more in. In a meeting where we have 2 different teams, sales and back office, there is a common problem that they are not bringing. As a facilitator, how would you introduce this problem? I had previously discussed with CEO and is a real challenge to fix. Chose. This is actually an older question that I answered, and long story, but I never clicked record when I answered this. And I asked Jose at that time to provide more context, and he is not here right now, so he can't give me that more context. Let me read it one more time. In a meeting where we have 2 different teams, there's a common problem that they are not bringing. As a facilitator, how would you introduce this problem? I'm sorry, I'm not clear on the question, so I don't want to wage a guess. This isn't so much a question. Well, this is a question, and I wanted to check in on it because, ironically, on my calendar was a reminder. This question is basically from Josh, and he's asking me my thoughts on Teressa Torres's continuous discovery habits. This is a new book that she's launched. And I checked in with Teressa, and she told I listened to all my books, and she told me that it was due to drop on Audible today or this week. I don't see it there right now, but I'm going to check back in and see if it drops this week or maybe next week. And then I'm really excited to read it. Teressa's super smart, has some really great ideas, and then I would love to have a conversation about this. Maybe even do a write-up about what I'm seeing, what I'm noticing, any stories that I can relate back to the work that we do at New Haircut. All right, that's it for today. Again, thank you for joining. Thank you for the great questions. Keep them coming, and I hope to see you at an upcoming event. See you soon.